Just as the people of Evil Sky Pavilion were being defeated one after another, the old demon Lu Zhou finally emerged. At this moment, the duel between Pan Lydian and Gong Yuandu had already begun. The Tai Chi symbol in the palm of Pan Lydian flashed immediately, and as he pushed out his palm, a sword's forceful energy fiercely shot out. The Tai Chi symbol enhanced the sword's forceful energy, making it unstoppable. Meanwhile, the area around Gong Yuandu was also constantly emitting bursts of sword forceful energy. Logically, a cultivator at the Mystic and Lightning realm should only be able to control 2 strands of sword forceful energy, but with the aid of a miniature array, Gong Yuandu's sword forceful energy was continuous and extraordinarily powerful. The sword forceful energies from both sides collided and rushed against each other, creating continuous booming sounds, intensely fierce. Everyone unconsciously stepped back, as this was not a battle at the Mystic and Lightning realm level. It seemed more like a contest at the Brahma Sea realm. Pan Lydian smiled slightly and stepped forward. His aged hand suddenly struck the ground, shattering the blue stone tiles instantly. Pan Zhong saw this and was enlightened. The array patterns have shattered. It indeed made sense for a cultivator at the Mystic and Lightning realm to shatter the floor, as their physical strength was sufficient to do so. However, just when everyone thought Pan Lydian was about to win, the situation suddenly changed. The shattered array patterns condensed into forceful energy, gathering together and flying towards Pan Lydian's Tai Chi symbol. With a bang, the Tai Chi symbol shattered, and the 2 remaining strands of sword forceful energy from Gong Yuandu were still suspended in the air. Lin Luo straightforwardly clapped, but everyone else was filled with confusion. Why have they stopped fighting? The victory hasn't been decided yet. It seemed Pan Lydian still had ample time to make a move and counter. What use was Gong Yuandu's additional sword forceful energy then? Amid the crowd's confusion, Pan Lydian suddenly bowed and said, "I admit defeat." Hua Wudao nodded and once again took on the role of commentator. The limit of the Mystic and Lightning realm has been reached. Upon hearing this, everyone instantly understood. Indeed, they had overlooked a key issue, that a Mystic and Lightning realm cultivator could handle 1 magic symbol and 2 strands of sword forceful energy was already the limit. Gong Yuandu, who could maintain 2 strands of sword forceful energy even after the array patterns had shattered, was clearly more skilled. Pan Lydian smiled and bowed. "Sir, your abilities have truly opened my eyes." After saying this, he stepped back. If even experienced elders like Lun Luo and Pan Lydian could not defeat Gong Yuandu in swordsmanship, then it was even less likely for others. The younger generation, with their shallower cultivation experience, could not bridge this gap simply with talent. Little Yuaner, watching Hua Wudao's back, teased, "It's your turn." Hua Wudao shook his head. "I'd rather not. I'm only skilled in defense." The 6 Union Seal can only show its miraculous effects after entering the nascent divinity tribulation realm, and it's useless in the Mystic and Lightning realm. I'm an idiot when it comes to swordsmanship. With no elder capable of fighting, the scene momentarily became somewhat awkward. Gong Yuandu chuckled. "I have studied and endured hardships in the Sword Tomb for 100 years. Defeating you is not strange." At that moment, Duan Mushing swung his overlord spear and snorted coldly. "These are just verbal skills, not a real comparison of cultivation. On the battlefield, who talks about rules and fairness? Right. Who would suppress their cultivation? Who would hide their trump cards?" The overlord spear heavily struck the blue stone floor, creating a crack. Duan Mushing's primal energy surged out like ocean waves, radiating a formidable presence. After a moment of silence, Gong Yuandu spoke indifferently. "If I were to fight with all my strength, you would undoubtedly die. But of course, I could no longer continue fighting." Duan Mushing frowned deeply. "Then let's try." A robust, forceful energy surrounded the overlord spear. "Then you try." As soon as he finished speaking, a 3-meter-tall avatar appeared behind him, seated on a golden lotus, with 2 leaves slowly rotating. Everyone was shocked, not expecting Duan Mushing to be so bold and fearless. Standing in the front, the atmosphere instantly became tense, ready to explode at any moment. Hua Wudao hurriedly stepped forward to persuade. "Duan Mushing, listen to me. Do not act recklessly. After all, this is the sword genius of the North Capital. He set the rule to duel with Mystic and Lightning realm cultivation as a concession. Why risk your life?" Duan Mushing firmly responded, "Elder Hua, no need to persuade further. If not me, then who? When the master is not here, with Yu Xinghai and Yu Shanrong absent from Evil Sky Pavilion, when the master is not around, naturally, Duan Mushing carries the most weight. Logically, Pan Lydian and Lun Luo would have the qualifications to stand in the front, but their cultivation has not fully recovered, leaving them no choice but to watch from the side." "Very well." Gong Yuandu's voice involuntarily rose. "I underestimated Brother Ji, not expecting such a disciple from him. Since that's the case, let me show you the true way of the sword." As soon as he finished speaking, the primal energy around the coffin fluctuated violently, far stronger than before. However, just as the coffin began to slowly float, a deeper voice came from the direction of the eastern pavilion. "Step back." Everyone looked toward the source of the voice, only to see that it was Lu Zhou, who had just ended his seclusion. Little Yuaner excitedly approached. "Master, you finally came. That lunatic from the Sword Tomb has caused trouble." Lu Zhou did not speak, stepping on air, floating down to the ground like a feather. He walked forward with his hands behind his back, his gaze falling falling on the coffin, and he calmly said, "Prepare the wine." Inside the coffin, Gong Yuandu's voice trembled slightly, uncertain whether it was from excitement or exhilaration. "Still, Brother Ji understands me." Upon hearing this, little Yuaner immediately ran to the north pavilion to fetch 100-year-old wine. Lu Zhou stroked his beard and said indifferently, "You are an elder after all, bullying the younger generation. I feel ashamed for you." Gong Yuandu fell silent, withdrawing the primal energy around the coffin, and slowly landed. The previously imperious him suddenly seemed to have conceded. Such an aura could likely only be suppressed by someone like Lu Zhou. Brother Ji is not one to break his word. Gong Yuandu spoke up. Lu Zhou remained composed. In fact, he himself did not know why he had secluded himself for so long. Strangely, it felt like only a few days had passed until he opened his eyes and suddenly realized a month had gone by. He did not dwell on this topic and instead picked up a bowl of wine, looking at the other. "Do you plan to hide in a coffin forever?" The aroma of wine filled the air, enticing Pan Lydian, who laughed. "Didn't expect to meet a kindred spirit. Had I known, I would have challenged you to a drinking contest rather than a sword duel." Ha! Wine is indeed a delight for the mood. Since ancient times, scholars reciting poetry and warriors brandishing swords, wine has always been essential. Lu Zhou took a sip of the wine, its fragrance filling the air, making Gong Yuandu and Pan Lydian, two wine lovers, itch with desire. Lu Zhou did not swallow the wine completely, savoring it. He gently exhaled, and the wine turned into a sword, instantly splitting into three paths, shooting straight toward the coffin. Three sword forceful energies were nailed directly onto the coffin. Hua Wudao exclaimed, "I had almost forgotten about the Pavilion Lord's mastery in swordsmanship. Back in the day, Luo Changqing of Cloud Sect had praised Yu Shanrong's swordsmanship more than once in public. But didn't Yu Shanrong learn everything from the Pavilion Lord? If the disciple is so formidable, how could the master be any less?" Gong Yuandu said hoarsely, "Admirable, admirable. Ordinary sword masters can only condense forceful energy, but a true sword master can make anything into a sword." Lu Zhou shook his head. "Minor skills, not worth mentioning. You could have blocked this move." The crowd was puzzled. Then why didn't he block it? Just as everyone was curious, with a crack, the lid of the coffin suddenly opened, and a gaunt arm stretched out, the forceful energy inside the coffin expanding outward, and Gong Yuandu finally appeared before everyone's eyes. He looked like a lacquered mummy, disheveled and bearded, his body wrapped in tattered cloth, his arms filthy as if he had been isolated from the world for many years. This was the result of living in a coffin for an extended period. Normally, a cultivator entering the mystic enlightening realm would need less food. Those in the Brahma Sea realm might eat every 3 to 5 days, and Divine Court realm cultivators could subsist on food once every 10 to 15 days. Having reached the nascent divinity tribulation realm, they can nourish themselves with primal energy from heaven and earth. However, after too long a time, they still need to supplement with food. It's hard to imagine how he survived in the coffin, managing eating, drinking, and relieving himself within such confined space. Perhaps he hunted rats and insects in the tomb? Just thinking about it makes one uncomfortable. Gong Yuandu slowly opened his eyes, seemingly not accustomed to the bright light outside, and after a while, his gaze fell on the table of wine in front of him. Brother Ji has changed. Gong Yuandu muttered to himself, unclear about what exactly had changed. He then raised his right hand, and the entire jar of wine hovered above his head, the wine pouring down like a waterfall. As Gong Yuandu looked up and drank heartily, laughing joyously, refreshing. "My cultivation has greatly declined. If it were a real fight with real swords and spears, I would undoubtedly be defeated." As he spoke, clumps of mud fell from his face. Lu Zhou sighed. "Knowing that your end is near, why cling so stubbornly?" Gong Yuandu shook his head and chuckled bitterly. "Brother Ji, you are not like me, not as ruthless or cold-blooded. To some extent, being merciful to your enemies is cruelty to yourself. I was defeated by you because of these reasons. You could have killed me, and then there wouldn't have been a succession of challenges, nor would there be my current predicament." Lu Zhou picked up his cup of wine and spoke slowly. "You don't understand. If you died, I would have no opponents left. It's lonely at the top, somewhat dull." Hearing this, Gong Yuandu was inwardly thrilled. Brother Ji flatters me. Being appreciated by the top demon of the world made Gong Yuandu's heart blossom with joy. "Bring the wine." Hearing Gong Yuandu shout, the female cultivators nearby quickly brought over dozens of jars of 100-year-old wine. Pan Lydian looked on with envy and jealousy, thinking to himself, no matter how much 100-year-old wine Evil Sky Pavilion has, it can't withstand such drinking. After several jars of wine were emptied, Gong Yuandu stood up and bowed to Lu Zhou. "Please fulfill this dying man's last regret, Brother Ji." Lu Zhou replied indifferently, "If that's the case, I will grant your wish. The old rules, debate with swords." Seeing this, Hua Wudao immediately stepped forward to briefly reiterate the previous situation. Even without saying, Lu Zhou understood Gong Yuandu's meaning. He had mentioned it during his time in the Sword Tomb. His cultivation had greatly declined, and it was no longer possible to perform earth-shattering acts. Rather than a life-and-death duel, it was more of a contest of moral convictions. Gong Yuandu flipped his palm, and the wine jar in front of him flew up, ready to resume this debate with swords. The wine spilled and transformed upon hitting the ground into forceful energy, creating the same Tai Chi symbol as before, which then gave rise to the two instruments and the four symbols. At the moment the symbol was formed, multiple sword forceful energies appeared in front of Gong Yuandu. Faced with the same technique, how would Lu Zhou, the foremost demon across the heavens, respond? Pan Lydian, who had just lost to this move, widened his eyes, eager to discern every detail of Lu Zhou's response. However, he noticed that Lu Zhou remained poised, holding his wine cup without moving, his deep eyes exuding immense confidence. Was this confidence or arrogance? Several sword forceful energies flew towards Lu Zhou simultaneously. Suddenly, Lu Zhou tossed his wine cup, and as it spun, a Tai Chi symbol appeared. Pan Lydian frowned, thinking to himself, my judgment was not wrong. Just as the Tai Chi symbol blocked the sword forceful energies, Lu Zhou lightly clapped his hand, and with a snap, the array pattern shattered. The Tai Chi symbol disappeared, and so did the four symbols sword array. The only difference was that this time Gong Yuandu had no sword forceful energies left. Lin Luo looked at Pan Lydian with a half smile. The same technique, when used by different people, results in such a vast difference. Pan Lydian's face turned red, and he huffed, stop teasing me. Pan Zhong curiously looked towards the center. The limit of the mystic and lightning realm has been reached. It seems Gong Yuandu has no more moves to make. However, Gong Yuandu shook his head and said softly, this move, I lose. This move, the four symbols array, consumes more than 4 times the energy of the Tai Chi symbol. Although Brother Ji only used a single palm strike, the overall energy consumed was far less than mine. With the least energy, he produced the greatest power. I am thoroughly convinced. Lu Zhou appeared indifferent, not particularly concerned with Gong Yuandu's praise. This was just a part of the swordsmanship experience and knowledge he had accumulated over many years. He just hadn't expected to use it in this setting. Again, Gong Yuandu crushed the wine jar and waved it into the air, the wine quickly forming into a series of irregularly shaped sword blades as it fell towards Lu Zhou. Lu Zhou was unruffled, suddenly raising his right hand, a wave of primal energy emanating from his fist, rippling outward. The sword blades instantly reverted back to wine, spilling onto the ground, while Lu Zhou's protective forceful energy also kept the wine at bay. Another move ended, and the outcome was clear. Gong Yuandu's eyelids twitched. This move, which he had painstakingly developed over many years in the sword tomb, transformed all things into swords, yet Lu Zhou easily resolved it. His swordsmanship, honed over hundreds of years, was effortlessly neutralized by the old demon, Lu Zhou. Gong Yuandu's eyelids twitched involuntarily again, while the nearby spectators were left dumbfounded. They could only condense forceful energy. How could they transform wine into sword forceful energy like Lu Zhou? After all, wine is not ordinary water. Lin Luo explained, the forceful energy forms a hollow, encapsulating the wine. This requires extremely high control over primal energy to form forceful energy with utmost precision. Cultivators usually attack their opponents using heavenly weapons by enveloping themselves or the weapon with forceful energy to create a powerful force. Substances like water flow, which lack hardness, can't cause significant damage, hence no cultivator would normally focus on this aspect. Unexpectedly, Gong Yuandu could easily do it, and even more unexpectedly, the Pavilion Lord could easily resolve it. The third move, Gong Yuandu said, stepping back a few paces, his arms spread wide, as several sword forceful energies suddenly appeared around him. Little Yuaner saw this and pouted. Didn't they say the mystic and lightning realm can only maintain 2 sword forceful energies? Gong Yuandu raised an eyebrow. Girl, who told you these aren't 2 sword forceful energies? As soon as he spoke, those sword forceful energies began to swirl around Gong Yuandu. Upon closer inspection, the sword forceful energies were as fine as little fingers, and they kept dividing and becoming smaller. They split from 1 into 2, 2 into 4, each division having their size while their numbers increased. Lin Luo shook his head. I have always believed that the value of troops lies in their quality, not quantity. Flashiness is meaningless. Gong Yuandu disagreed, chuckling. In numbers, there is formation. The next second, countless sword forceful energies, like golden needles, formed a sword array. This was beyond their understanding of the mystic and lightning realm. Strictly speaking, this was not a sword array that a mystic and lightning realm cultivator could perform. After all, Gong Yuandu's insights, experience, expertise, and control were at a pinnacle level. Sword forceful energy formed a connected Big Dipper, densely emitting a faint golden light. This sword array is something I learned from observing the 7 absolute array day and night in the sword tomb. I wonder if Brother Ji can break this formation. 7 absolute array? This was shameless, having spent so long in the sword tomb to understand such things, and then coming to ask the Pavilion Lord to break it in a short time. Is this how you debate? Shouldn't the fairest debate be to just fight it out? Hua Wudao's old face reddened. This scene was very much like his own past. Back then, he spent 20 years studying the retraction technique, asking the Pavilion Lord to break it. Thinking about it now, it was foolish, too childish. Pan Lydian said, indeed, the value of troops is in their quality, but if they are both numerous and of high quality, that is truly frightening. Wouldn't you agree? Lin Luo just shook his head. This old man can't go a day without being contrary. The next second, something surprising happened. Under everyone's tense gaze, Lu Zhou slowly stood up, moving himself and the table half a meter backwards, out of the sword array. A superfluous sword array. Lu Zhou spoke indifferently, giving his assessment. I am not within the array, yet I can attack you at any time. As he spoke, he flipped his palm upwards, and two sword forceful energies appeared, exceptionally striking. Gong Yuandu stepped back several times, feeling a tightness in his chest. Suddenly faced with such a ruthless verbal assault, he was somewhat unable to accept it. He had spent so long painstakingly researching the 7 absolute sword array, a theory exquisite and the design complete, even successfully implemented. However, he overlooked one important fact. The opponent does not enter the array. All his research was based on the assumption that the opponent would enter the array. Thus, even the most mystical sword array became meaningless, reduced to mere trivia. Seeing Gong Yuandu in this state, people couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh. In the cultivation world, geniuses like Gong Yuandu, obsessed with their research, were not rare. However, no matter how solid the theory, without practical testing, it ultimately remained just talk. Gong Yuandu clenched his right hand, and with a whoosh, a gust of wind arose. The sword forceful energies scattered with the wind, and the miniature 7 absolute sword array on the ground also dispersed. He closed his eyes, silent. Everyone looked perplexed, not knowing what he was about to do. Lu Zhou set down his wine cup, stood with his hands behind his back, and said, "Let go of your obsessions. The end is still far away. I am older than you and not at all afraid of the end. I can give you an opportunity." Opportunity? Gong Yuandu was momentarily stunned upon hearing this word. Lu Zhou continued calmly, "Indeed, I can ensure you live through this final century." As for transcending the ultimate limit, he was not certain. No one in the cultivation world was sure of this. This seclusion had also raised many questions that needed to be addressed step by step, including the doubts about the ultimate limit. No need. The final move. Before he could finish speaking, primal energy surged violently. This was no longer the realm of Mystic Enlightening Realm. It was climbing continuously from Mystic Enlightening Realm, through Sense Condensing Realm, Brahma Sea Realm, Divine Court Realm, up to Nascent Divinity Tribulation Realm. His whole demeanor indicated that this move was no longer confined to the limits of Mystic Enlightening Realm, but was an all-out effort, even a fight to the death. Accompanied by a buzzing sound, an impossibly tall avatar appeared, surrounded by densely packed, spinning sword forceful energies. The entire evil sky pavilion seemed to be enveloped by these sword forceful energies. Seeing this, Hua Wudao immediately activated the 6 Union Seal, covering everyone within it. "Don't leave the range of my protection." Everyone was caught off guard by Gong Yuandu's sudden move, which was executed with his full strength. This move was almost desperate. Only Lu Zhou stood outside the 6 Union Seal, still with his hands behind his back. Sword forceful energies continued to converge, each move containing all his trump cards. The irregular sword forceful energies and those that landed and formed arrays grew stronger and stronger. "Please enlighten me." As Gong Yuandu's words fell, thousands of sword forceful energies, under the control of the avatar in him, poured out like a torrential flood. It seemed as if the primal energy of the entire Golden Court Mountain was being drawn to this massive avatar. The air within a kilometer roiling, clouds swirling. The moment the sword forceful energies gathered, they shot towards Lu Zhou. "Master!" Under everyone's shocked gazes, thousands of sword forceful energies converged into a single point, transforming into a blinding golden light that reached Lu Zhou's forehead in the blink of an eye. It was at this moment that Lu Zhou finally spoke. "Scram!" Lu Zhou snorted coldly, uttering just one word. This scram exploded in everyone's ears like thunder. The sword forceful energy closest to Lu Zhou's forehead was instantly repelled back. Gong Yuandu's huge avatar lasted only a breath before it was blown apart by the storm-like sound waves. Lu Zhou's vocal supernatural powers exceeded everyone's expectations. After striking Gong Yuandu, the sound wave continued upward. With a bang, the already fragile barrier of Golden Court Mountain was popped like a bubble by the sound wave from the inside. The next second, the barrier of Golden Court Mountain completely dissipated. Evil Sky Pavilion fell silent. Hua Wudao's 6 Union Seal also shattered instantly. What a terrifying scram word. It's good that the attack was directed at Gong Yuandu in the sky. It's just unfortunate about the barrier. Hua Wudao looked up at the sky, only to see Gong Yuandu suspended in midair with a shocked expression. Then he groaned and plummeted down. He crashed to the ground and in front of Lu Zhou. Lu Zhou looked up at the sky, where there was no longer any trace of the barrier. The power seemed much greater than last time, complicating the matter, and he felt a headache coming on. Lu Zhou felt uncomfortable. He hadn't wanted this. With the barrier gone, what would the righteous sects think? Although the power of the barrier was weak, it was still much stronger than the defense of a nascent divinity tribulation realm expert. Everyone got up, looking somewhat disheveled toward Gong Yuandu's direction. They were just as puzzled by the scene they had just witnessed. The Pavilion Lord had a high style, and he had destroyed the barrier himself. It was really a grand gesture. Although they didn't understand why the Pavilion Lord did this, everyone felt, cool, that's it. My 6 Union Seal didn't lose unjustly, Hua Wudao remarked. Lu Zhou's gaze also fell on Gong Yuandu, only to find that he hadn't died. The scram word's great supernatural powers had instantly shattered the barrier, but failed to kill Gong Yuandu. How was this achieved? Gong Yuandu lay on the ground for a while before he struggled to sit up, his expression a mix of laughter and tears. tears. He looked down at the ground, utterly defeated. How could a grown man cry in front of everyone? He laughed, letting out a loud laugh for a while, completely disregarding the pain in his body. Then, he looked desolately at Lu Zhou and said, "I lost." Lu Zhou nodded, asking, "Do you understand now?" Gong Yuandu puzzled. "Understand what?" "The reason you lost." "I don't understand." Gong Yuandu shook his head, then got up and staggered to the table, where they each filled their cups with wine. "You still have 100 years ahead. Are you really willing to give up?" Lu Zhou's tone carried a hint of inquiry. Hearing this, Gong Yuandu sighed, shook his head, and said, "Brother Ji doesn't know." He picked up the wine jar, tilted his head back and took several big gulps before setting it down, and said gravely, "There's no coming back." Lu Zhou curiously asked, "Why can't you return?" Gong Yuandu gave a carefree smile. "Essence blood. I have already burned my essence blood." Essence blood? Lu Zhou frowned slightly, naturally understanding that essence blood is the foundation of life, not to be used lightly, just to increase your cultivation. Lu Zhou pressed. Gong Yuandu coughed violently twice, and with this cough, he spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood. It was unclear whether this was caused by the recent scram-word great supernatural powers or a recurrence of an old injury, but after spitting out the blood, his hair eerily turned half white in an instant. However, he seemed not to care, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, took another sip from his wine jar, and forced a smile, just a little bit more. 9 leaves. Anyone with a bit of cultivation knowledge knows what 9 leaves represent. 8 leaves are the limit that humans can reach, and to date, no cultivator has successfully broken through to 9 leaves. At least, not publicly. Even in the rarely human-trodden misty forest, or the sea vortexes where no one dares to venture, there have been no masters of 9 leaves. There's also no record of this in any of the human-accessible scriptures. Lu Zhou spoke calmly. "A miss is as good as a mile. Brother Ji, don't you feel it?" "What kind of feeling is it?" "A dangerous feeling," Gong Yuandu said. "A dangerous, mysterious feeling, like life is slipping away." At this, Gong Yuandu lowered his voice. "Every time my cultivation increased, I felt myself aging rapidly. I couldn't stop it. Once I tried to stop, the primal energy I had painstakingly accumulated would leave the energy sea." Lu Zhou continued to press. "When did you first have this feeling?" Gong Yuandu answered, "In the sword tomb, during the 10th year. In the 30th year. The first time, you stopped it, but not the second time?" Lu Zhou asked. Gong Yuandu nodded. "I had no choice." After hearing this, Lu Zhou fell into thought. If what he says is true, then the limit of human cultivation is 8 leaves. Unfortunately, Gong Yuandu alone, the case is too rare, too few to draw any conclusions. At that moment, Gong Yuandu coughed again, and after this cough, his hair turned completely white, and the dirt could no longer hide his white hair. Everyone watched in shock, not knowing what was happening. Lu Zhou seemed to understand something and said softly, "Stupid. If not like this, I would die immediately. Sometimes, it's not bad to be a bit foolish." After saying this, he grabbed the wine jar and poured it into his mouth. The old brew in his stomach churned violently, but he did not feel discomfort. Instead, he enjoyed it. Perhaps it was because he had been in the coffin for too long and hadn't felt this sensation. The stimulation of the old brew made him feel alive, that he was still human. Unfortunately, each time he drank, his hair would turn white again, the dirt peeled off, and his skin wrinkled so much it hardly looked like normal skin. It could even be mistaken for tree bark. "Actually, when I made my move just now, I suddenly had an illusion. I could kill you," Gong Yuandu said. Hearing this, Lu Zhou confidently smiled. "If I didn't have some tricks up my sleeve, you would have already been dead." Gong Yuandu weakly nodded, recalling the 7 absolute array in the sword tomb, and his own demonic sword. If the opponent could break his demonic sword and the 7 absolute array and defeat him, what did it matter? Brother Ji is older than me, and his cultivation is far superior to mine. It won't be long before you feel the same as I do. Perhaps our predecessors felt this way when they sought breakthroughs. Lu Zhou remembered Gong Yuandu's description and thought about the various feelings during his seclusion and laughed nonchalantly. The oldest among ordinary people live only about 100 years. Perhaps cultivators are just another kind of ordinary people. Gong Yuandu glanced at Lu Zhou, his gaze sweeping over the other's white hair. "Brother Ji, that's a fresh explanation. Brother Ji has changed a lot." Lu Zhou nodded, noncommittally saying 3 words, "So have you." It wasn't appropriate to say in his presence that he came from another world, a very special, very distant world. They were old rivals. In some ways, old rivals understand each other better than friends do. Lu Zhou remembered the memories in his mind. The Gong Yuandu in those memories was not a good sort either. Indeed, 2 tigers cannot share one mountain. Gong Yuandu was naturally scheming, enduring, and cunning, able to spend a century in the sword tomb, enduring what ordinary people could not. How could he live under another's roof? Perhaps it's true that a dying man's words are kind. This Gong Yuandu seemed to lack the shadows of his past. After 3 rounds of drinks, the day was waning. Gong Yuandu's gaze swept over Leng Luo, Pan Lidian, and Hua Wudao, and he asked, "Who are these 2 who discussed swords with me?" Hearing his question, Leng Luo once again stated his name. He might have felt that Gong Yuandu's condition was a bit off, like someone with dementia, with very short-term memory. Pan Lidian was about to call himself Old Beggar, but after thinking it over, he ultimately gave his real name, Pan Lidian. Gong Yuandu seemed a bit surprised when he heard Pan Litian's name, the #1 expert of Clarity Sect. I remember you. After the death of the previous head of Clarity Sect, you fought with the 8 elders. It said you were seriously injured and saved by the 4th prince, then ran off to the border, right? Everyone turned to look at Pan Litian. Was this why Pan Litian left Clarity Sect? Pan Litian waved his hand dismissively. It's all in the past, not worth mentioning. Gong Yuandu seemed to have a momentary flash of vigor, straightening up a bit as he spoke. Brother Ji really has great skills. Even old-timers like Lung Luo and Pan Litian are under your control. Admirable, truly admirable. After saying this, he coughed again. This time, however, he did not cough up blood, but his hair turned white again, this time aging completely. Burning essence blood means prematurely using up life force, obtaining a short-term increase in cultivation through extreme measures. Even if one were to perform emergency healing, it cannot be recovered. Moreover, Gong Yuandu's earth-shattering move earlier. Gong Yuandu's gaze landed on Lu Zhou, still harboring a murderous intent, but time was almost up. Lu Zhou had originally planned to give Gong Yuandu a chance to stay at Evil Sky Pavilion, but after hearing his insights from the Sword Tomb, that chance was no longer available. Lu Zhou glanced at the nearby coffin. Aren't you going to go back into the coffin? Gong Yuandu shook his head. No, I suddenly remember a kind of witchcraft. If someone wants to control me, I won't be able to sit still. Right after he finished speaking, a gust of wind picked up, and there was a noticeable fluctuation in his protective chi. Gong Yuandu's feet started to disintegrate like sand, bit by bit peeling away. Lu Zhou handed him a cup. Good wine. Have a few more drinks. Gong Yuandu took the cup, his hoarse voice gradually disappearing, becoming lively, young, and even somewhat playful. He had used his energy center and energy C to block the Scram Word's great supernatural powers, but the sealed energy C ultimately couldn't hold on. Good wine. After a cup of wine, his entire right leg had vanished, turning into sand and drifting away with the wind, followed by his other leg. Gong Yuandu set down his wine cup as the wind grew stronger and his arms began to gradually dissipate. About to go. Any last words? Lu Zhou shook his head in response. What could he say? After all, he came from another world, and his relationship with Gong Yuandu was limited to the familiarity in his memories. He thought of all his experiences since crossing over, remembering the efforts to survive against the 10 famous sects. Suddenly, a poem surfaced in his mind, seemingly perfectly expressing his complex emotions at the moment. So he softly recited, "Let's have one more drink. Beyond the Yangwan Pass, there will be no old friends." A gentle wave of energy rippled out, and Gong Yuandu's body, like sand, was swept up by the wild wind. When only his head remained, he asked one last question. Where is Yangwan? Unfortunately, he didn't wait for Lu Zhou's answer before he drifted away in the wind across Golden Court Mountain. His energy completely dissipated, leaving nothing behind at the table. Once again, quiet returned to the front of Evil Sky Pavilion. Lu Zhou looked into the distance, silent for a long time. After all, he was just an archenemy. Gong Yuandu had burned his essence blood, losing 100 years of life. Even if he hadn't come to challenge Evil Sky Pavilion, he would have died anyway. He had originally intended to die in his coffin to leave a whole corpse. Perhaps having a sudden realization while drinking, he changed his mind. Clean up, Lu Zhou instructed before walking into the hall, with everyone else following. Ming Shirin and Zhao Yu aren't here? Lu Zhou asked. Duan Mushing, hearing his master's question, bowed and answered, Master, when you were in seclusion, Old Fourth sent a flying letter. He said he's in Divine Capital and will pick up Sister Zhao Yu to return to Evil Sky Pavilion together, needing some time. Lu Zhou nodded. Let them be. Then he looked at the 3 elders. Seeing their white hair and aged appearances, he felt slightly embarrassed. Evil Sky Pavilion had become an elder's pavilion. Only little Yuaner was vibrant and radiant. Afterward, Lu Zhou fell into thought again, recalling the scene of Gong Yuandu drifting away with the wind. He himself was not worried because of the reversal card. But what about them? While he was pondering, Pan Zhong brought a flying letter from Jian Aijian. Old Senior, Orthodox sect has been destroyed by Underworld sect. Zhang Yuanzhan's whereabouts are unknown. Underworld sect's actions have caught the attention of the royal family. Coincidentally, Anyang and Upper Prime are in chaos, resulting in the royal family being unable to deal with Underworld sect. Your 4th and 5th disciples are safe in Divine Capital. I will keep an eye on them for you. Another piece of news. The 5 rats are dead, killed by your 6th disciple, Yi Tianqin. After reading, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone sighed. They had already anticipated this, but it was unexpected that Yi Tianqin, under such circumstances, would still think of Evil Sky Pavilion. When Yi Tianqin left Evil Sky Pavilion, her cultivation had only partially recovered, and whether she could survive was questionable. How did she manage to restore her cultivation so quickly in such a short time? The incident with the 5 rats occurred while you were in seclusion. I didn't dare disturb you, Master, Duan Mushing said cautiously. Lu Zhou responded indifferently. It's all right. Then, while Wu Dao spoke up, Yi Tianqin was originally a disciple of Evil Sky Pavilion. Although she was expelled from the sect, she can be considered as having returned to the right path. Ling Luo sighed. It's all Ling's fault for being careless at the time and falling for Molly's tricks. Everyone looked at him, surprised that the former #1 on the blacklist would introspect himself, which was rare. However, the blame couldn't entirely be placed on on Lung Luo. The actual perpetrator behind the massacre of the white citizens was the commander-in-chief Wei Zhuoyan, and the real Wei Zhuoyan had long been dead, with the behind-the-scenes mastermind Moli remaining deep in the palace, also Lung Luo's nemesis. Everyone appeared somewhat weary, clearly fatigued by the recent sword discussions with Gong Yuandu. "You three elders go back and rest," Lu Zhou said. The three bowed and quietly left the evil sky pavilion hall. Little Yuana then asked, "Should I go look for Sister Qianqin?" Lu Zhou glanced at her and replied, "No need." Everyone kept silent. Just because she dealt with the 5 rats, she wants to associate with Evil Sky Pavilion? Evil Sky Pavilion isn't going anywhere. She dealt with the 5 rats, yet didn't even come to see me. Should I, as her master, really go out of my way to seek out this ungrateful traitor? Absolutely not. Master, I'm a bit worried about Old Fourth there. After all, it's divine capital. Lu Zhou waved his hand dismissively. There's probably no place safer than inside the palace walls. Don't worry. If that weren't the case, I would have long since taken Whitezerd into the palace myself to take Moli's dog life. Would she even have the chance to plot behind the scenes? Besides, with Jian Aiqian looking after things, there shouldn't be any major issues. Lu Zhou then wanted to study the 3rd supernatural power of the heavenly writing, but thinking of Gong Yuandu's words before his death, he couldn't help but sigh. He checked the system interface's merit points and saw that Gong Yuandu's death had awarded him 1,500 points, likely the highest reward for a single target so far. Could it be that the 9 leaves truly represents an insurmountable barrier? Has really no one ever broken through the 1,000-year limit since ancient times? Although Gong Yuandu was an old rival, after all, he was from the same era as me. To say it didn't affect me would be self-deception. Lu Zhou suddenly wondered if Ji Tiandao had also failed to break through the 9 leaves and fallen. White citizen, riding the yellow, the secrets of longevity, crossing the Sky River to retrieve corpses. He is not the only one in this world seeking the secrets of longevity. Initially, he didn't care about this issue because he had the reversal card. But now, looking back, Ji Tiandao's fall was not simple, and the system might not guarantee that he wouldn't follow the same path. Eventually, my disciples will age and die. Who will earn merit for you when your disciples are dead? Lu Zhou thought to himself. Relying on the system for immortality doesn't seem quite right. Lu Zhou also thought of Yu Xinghai and Yu Shangrong. When they left Evil Sky Pavilion, they were already at the 8 leaves level. Over the years, with their talents, had they also been seeking the secrets of the 9 leaves and longevity like Gong Yuandu said? What secrets lie between the 8 and 9 leaves? Bring Qin Jun up. Hearing Lu Zhou's words, Pan Zhong immediately went to arrange it. Soon after, Qin Jun was brought into the hall. Lu Zhou looked at him and asked, "What misdeeds have you helped Yu Xinghai with?" Little Yuan urged anxiously. Qin Jun was initially not scared, but little Yuan's imposing manner startled him. "Old sir, I've been wronged. I truly haven't done any misdeeds for sect leader Yu. He visited my residence 3 times, each only to tour divine capital. In past cooperations, I've only passed on some messages for him, but all the messages deliberately avoided involving Evil Sky Pavilion. Please see the truth, old sir." Lu Zhou asked him what messages he had passed on, and Qin Jun honestly confessed, mostly about the Imperial Guards and the 10 Absolutes array, the situations in Anyang and Upper Prime cities, and also the conditions of the 5 princes. The last time sect leader Yu came to divine capital was over a month ago. He said he would settle scores with Sword Demon. Besides that, there really isn't anything else. I swear, if I'm lying, may I die without a burial place. Lu Zhou fell into thought after hearing this. It seems that King Qi could only offer so much value. He had already guessed Yu Xinghai's ambitions. Inquiring about the Imperial Guards and the 10 Absolutes array was clearly paving the way for the future. The chaos in Anyang and Upper Prime was likely not unconnected to him. Encountering the underworld sect's flying letter in Anyang now also made sense. He wants to settle scores with Yu Shangrong. Qin Jun nodded. Both the Great Sir and the Second Sir are disciples of Evil Sky Pavilion. Both of their cultivations are unprecedented. Perhaps among the great masters, there's a mutual recognition, and they want to determine who is superior. Lu Zhou raised an eyebrow and scoffed coldly. It's an iron rule of Evil Sky Pavilion that disciples must not kill each other. How did you become enemies upon leaving Evil Sky Pavilion? When and where? Qin Jun replied. It should be in over 4 months. As for the location, I really don't know. Both of them are fearsome demons. How could they possibly let outsiders know the location of their duel? Lu Zhou slowly stood up, descended the steps, and looked directly at Qin Jun, asking, "Do you know Yu Xinghai's true cultivation level?" Qin Jun dared not meet Lu Zhou's gaze, merely shaking his head continuously. Matters like cultivation level are extremely secretive. It's normal for him not to know. Everyone leave. Lu Zhou waved his hand to dismiss them. After everyone had left, Lu Zhou returned to his room and opened the system interface to see that his merit points were only 1,500, which was pitifully little. Everything needed to enhance cultivation was tied to merit points. Being so broke, how could he afford to buy avatars or advance his realm? Lu Zhou always thought about capturing those treacherous disciples, but the problem was that the remaining 3 were not simple. Old Seventh, despite being hit by the body-binding divine spell and losing his cultivation, had still not shown himself, and given Ming Shirin's abilities, the fact that he hadn't been able to bring him back indicated the difficulty difficulty of the task. His current cultivation was even inferior to Ming Shirin's. Although he had acquired the third supernatural power, he still didn't know what it was. However, to Lu Zhou's surprise, that recent move, the scram-word Great Supernatural Powers, only used about half of his extraordinary power. In other words, the activation of heavenly writing not only gave Lu Zhou the third supernatural power, but also increased his extraordinary power. As for Yu Zhenghai and Yu Shangrong, it was certain that both of their strengths were above 8 leaves. I still need to enhance my cultivation, not just my own, but also my disciples. Only with sufficient cultivation can we capture these treacherous disciples and uncover the secrets of the 9 leaves. With this thought, Lu Zhou called out, "Yuaner." Little Yuaner liked to practice nearby, and at the sound of her master's voice, she whooshed down. She didn't kneel but instead bounced around playfully as she spoke. "Disciple is here." Lu Zhou shook his head slightly. "You're not young anymore, yet you don't act properly." Little Yuaner felt somewhat wronged. Disciple hasn't made any mistakes recently. Lu Zhou spoke earnestly. "Times have changed. You've grown up. You can't act like a child anymore. You need to stand on your own. One day, you will need to face things alone. The world of cultivation is treacherous and full of deceit. Always acting like a child, you will never find your footing." Little Yuaner nodded, somewhat understanding. "Call your third senior brother here." "I'll go right now." Soon after, Duan Mushing and Little Yuaner came together. Among the evil Sky Pavilion disciples, only the 2 of them were left. Old 8 was still reflecting in the reflection cave. Lu Zhou looked at Duan Mushing and asked, "How is your practice of the heavenly first decision coming along?" Duan Mushing responded, "The pace of cultivation is acceptable, but I vaguely feel that my progress is a bit slow." Lu Zhou then looked at Little Yuaner and asked, "What about you?" Little Yuaner replied, "I feel okay. It seems like I'm about to make another breakthrough." Lu Zhou was somewhat speechless, thinking to himself, "Seems a bit overconfident. Does such a monstrously talented disciple really need my personal instruction?" Then, maintaining his composure, he said, "I will teach you properly from now on." Hearing this, both Duan Mushing and Little Yuaner's eyes lit up, and they said in unison, "Thank you, Master." The next day came quickly. Below the pavilion at Evil Sky Pavilion was a spacious area, beautiful and very suitable for cultivation. Duan Mushing and Little Yuaner gathered there. Lu Zhou looked at Duan Mushing and said, "You go first. Perform the heavenly first decision without using primal energy." Upon hearing his master's instruction, Duan Mushing began to practice on the field. His movements were powerful and commanding, all observed by the onlookers. Evil Sky Pavilion's 9 disciples were well known, and everyone was curious about how this grandmaster taught his disciples. Hearing that Lu Zhou suddenly wanted to properly train his disciples, people gathered around, standing at a distance to watch. Particularly, the 3 elders of Evil Sky Pavilion, given their status, naturally did not deign to stand with the younger generation and instead stood aside together. "Come over here." Lu Zhou gestured with a wave of his sleeve. The 3 elders hesitated slightly, given their status as elders of Evil Sky Pavilion, and then bowed their hands, saying, "Thank you, Pavilion Lord." After a moment, Duan Mushing finished his performance. Lu Zhou looked at the 3 elders and asked, "What do the elders think?" Hua Wudao quickly bowed and said, "We are just elders of Evil Sky Pavilion. We dare not presume to offer guidance." Normally, they would freely give advice, but in such a setting, they needed to be more reserved since Duan Mushing was not their direct disciple. Lu Zhou was silent for a moment, then sent a small, glittering Taoist palm print toward him. Duan Mushing instinctively wanted to dodge, but Lu Zhou commanded, "Don't dodge." The palm print hit him squarely in the chest, thankfully with not too much force, merely a pure test. "The foundation is not bad, but your attacks are too hasty, and you use too much force," Lu Zhou commented. At the waterfall on the back mountain, train for 2 hours daily for 3 consecutive months. Instructing Duan Mushing, "You have earned 300 merit points." Duan Mushing was very happy after receiving his master's guidance. After all, his master hadn't always been like this. Previously, it was all about learning through harsh beatings. Now, not only could his master keep his temper and provide proper instruction, but he also taught them the correct methods of cultivation. How could he not be excited? Disciple obeys. "Pavilion Lord, this method is indeed good. Practicing in the waterfall can effectively enhance one's patience and spear technique," Hua Wudao praised. "It seems there's a reason why the disciples of Evil Sky Pavilion are strong." Indeed, Pan Litian chimed in agreement. Lu Zhou skeptically glanced at the 3, having hoped for some practical advice, but it seemed the Elders Pavilion might need one more words added. Elders Flattery Pavilion. Nearby, Pan Zhong and Zhou Jifeng watched with envy, wondering which of the disciples at Clarity Sect and Heaven Sword Sect received such hands-on guidance from their master. Lu Zhou continued, "Use primal energy and do it again." Disciple obeys. With that, Duan Mushing raised one hand, and the Overlord spear immediately flew into his grasp. Naturally bold and vigorous, he had felt constrained performing without primal energy, which wasn't satisfying. Now, with so many onlookers, he felt particularly eager, having been ordered by his master. The Overlord spear smoothly flew into his palm, and Duan Mushing closed his fingers, emitting forceful energy from between them. "Heaven's favor has flaws?" Hua Wudao frowned. He sparred frequently with Duan Mushing and was well acquainted with his techniques. "Heaven's favor has flaws flaws was the most powerful move in the heavenly first decision. Originally, Lu Zhou used this move to slay hundreds of cultivators from the 10 great sects with a single stroke, under the activation of the 100 Tribulation Insight Avatar and a large accumulation of primal energy. Duan Mushing's top-down approach was unusual. Would an enemy just stand there motionless? However, considering it was a practice session, there was no need to nitpick. The move executed, the spear tip briefly displayed thousands of spear images, then unified. Duan Mushing finished his routine and slowly descended back to the ground. Disciple has completed the demonstration. The group of female cultivators nearby immediately applauded. Laymen enjoy the show. Experts observe the technique. Lu Zhou stroked his beard, looked at the three elders, and asked, "Do you have any comments? Feel free to speak your mind." Hua Wudao, feeling the most moved, was the first to bow and say, "If I really have to say something, it's flashy but lacks substance. That's it." Pan Zhong and Zhou Jifeng, hearing this, were somewhat baffled. Lu Zhou then turned to Leng Luo and the others. "What do you two think?" Leng Luo shook his head, saying, "All flash, no substance." Pan Litian took a sip from his wine gourd and said, "It's all surface level." Duan Mushing felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, ashamed but unsure where he went wrong, and could only stiffly wait for his master's evaluation. Lu Zhou, however, remained calm. Lu Zhou was not upset by the three's less favorable reviews. "Did you clearly hear what the three elders just said?" Disciple heard clearly. "You haven't even mastered the moves of heavenly first decision, yet you aspire to create new techniques?" Upon hearing this, Duan Mushing's face immediately turned red, and he dared not speak. "Your teacher once personally demonstrated heaven's favor has flaws at Evil Sky Pavilion. Do you remember?" Disciple remembers. "Practice it as shown. When you can break through the 6 union seal with a grand opening, then you will be considered proficient." Hua Wudao suddenly fell silent, a sense of foreboding rising in his heart. Disciple will heed the master's instructions and will diligently practice heaven's favor has flaws. Instructing Duan Mushing, awarded 300 merit points. Receiving merit points again surprised Lu Zhou. The role of a teacher is to impart knowledge, guide, and resolve doubts. Perhaps this is the true way of a teacher. A breeze swept over the hillside, and Lu Zhou looked up at the sky, noticing the winds were indeed much stronger than before. Hua Wudao bowed and said, "The barrier of Golden Court Mountain has weakened. If this continues, those from the orthodox paths may become restless." Leng Luo shook his head, unconvinced. "I don't think so. Pavilion Lord once defeated Heaven Sword sect on the Lotus platform and saved many cultivators, which must have already spread throughout the cultivation world. The orthodox sects coveting the treasures of Evil Sky Pavilion have made too many mistakes in their haste for profit. If there were no barrier now, would you charge up the mountain yourself?" Pan Litian chuckled. "Old Hua, you come from Cloud sect. You should understand the behavior of the orthodox path even better." Hua Wudao nodded and sighed. They didn't need to say it. Lu Zhou was well aware of what the so-called orthodox path behavior entailed. Whether it was the first or second siege, the orthodox sects always liked to gather under the banner of subduing the demonic path. This time would be no exception. Lu Zhou gazed into the distance and said indifferently, "Merely rats. As long as I am at Evil Sky Pavilion, no one will tread over it." His tone was calm yet carried an undeniable force. Even the distinguished three elders couldn't help but feel awe. Pan Litian sighed. Clarity sect, Heaven Sword sect, Orthodox sect have been destroyed. Even if they wanted to come, they would have to consider it very carefully. Everyone nodded in agreement. "It's your turn now." Little Yuaner couldn't wait and stood in the center of the field. The four immediately ceased their discussion and all eyes turned to her. Cloud robe feather dress, cloud stepping boots, Brahma heaven silk. What some people spend their lives pursuing, others are born with. Comparing people can kill. Talent is fearsome enough, but she also possesses heavenly treasures on her person. Lu Zhou looked at Little Yuaner and nodded. "Perform around." Little Yuaner complied and began executing the 7 stars gathering cloud step, moving with extreme fluidity. At Lu Zhou's gesture, Little Yuaner eagerly began her performance. This set of movements, footwork, and fist techniques flowed like running water, especially the 7 stars gathering cloud step, a top-tier technique. With the aid of the cloud stepping boots, and if she mobilized primal energy, the audience would see only after images, nothing else. After completing her routine, everyone watching was full of praise. "I'm done." Little Yuaner waited contentedly for her master's evaluation. Lu Zhou did not rush to comment but instead looked toward the three elders. Leng Luo was the first to speak. "Supreme Purity Jade Slip?" Little Yuaner nodded in response. "Yes." After hearing this, Leng Luo turned to Lu Zhou and asked, "I have a question I'd like to ask the Pavilion Lord. Since the Supreme Purity Jade Slip mainly focuses on movement, footwork, and fist techniques, why not practice the art of invisibility? When Pavilion Lord fought against the 10 sorcerers, you could use the Taoist 9-character mantra hand seal. A little invisibility should be nothing to you." Pan Litian added, "Cultivators often slow their progress by practicing too many techniques at once. Many cultivators, throughout their lives, at most master 2 or 3 cultivation methods." The group awaited Lu Zhou's response with some anticipation. Lu Zhou stroked his beard and said, "The art of invisibility is ultimately just a technique for escape. There are thousands of cultivation techniques under Taoism, chaotic and mixed, yet none that combine the strengths of of all, out of thousands of techniques, very few can master one to perfection in their lifetime. Everyone's capacity for cultivation is limited. Even great cultivators cannot master everything. However, my disciples must be exceptional. Lu Zhou did not need to be too explicit for the three elders to understand his point. If it were any other sex cultivator, naturally, they would focus on mastering one path. But the cultivator in question is the ninth disciple of Evil Sky Pavilion, and little Yuaner's talent is unmatched. If she has the capacity, learning multiple techniques is beneficial. Lin Luo bowed and said, I have learned much. Pan Lydian chuckled and looked at Lin Luo. You spent your life learning the art of invisibility for escape, yet haven't you secretly learned some techniques of assassination too? Otherwise, how could you stand where you are today? Lin Luo glanced disdainfully at the old man, thinking, always coming out to throw cold water at crucial moments, truly ill-intentioned. Pan Lydian raised his wine gourd as a gesture and then bowed to Lu Zhou, saying, I believe the Supreme Purity Jade Slip is indeed one of the most suitable techniques for little Yuaner. However, little Yuaner still needs time to solidify her foundation. This reminded little Yuaner of their trip to Clarity Sect together, recalling when Pan Lydian asked her to use the Brahma Heaven Silk to remove the gourd stopper. Her control over the basics indeed still needed much improvement, but such skills aren't developed overnight. Hua Wudao concurred. Indeed, that's true. Lin Luo shook his head disdainfully and said, you just said she's new to this. How can she have so much time to refine her basics, forcing the girl to achieve centuries of control? I'm truly embarrassed for you. Hua Wudao nodded in agreement after hearing this. Lu Zhou helplessly shook his head, thinking to himself that these old men really were nitpicking, indeed making it a bit hard for them. He turned to little Yuaner, speaking earnestly, remember the teachings of the three elders. You rely too much on external items. From today on, store away the Brahma Heaven Silk, Cloud Stepping Boots, and Cloud Robe Feather Dress, and don't wear them unless absolutely necessary. Wait until you open your fifth leaf. Disciple obeys. Although little Yuaner was somewhat reluctant, she obediently nodded her head. By guiding little Yuaner, you've earned 300 merit points. Lu Zhou felt a stir in his heart, having earned 900 merit points so quickly. The path of teaching indeed seemed like a broad and grand avenue. While the treasures on little Yuaner indeed added luster to her, they had been dragging her basic cultivation down. If others pointed it out, they might be suspected of envying her treasures, but coming from her master, it was most appropriate. Hua Wudao exclaimed, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would find it hard to believe that Pavilion Lord's guidance to his disciples would be like this. It's completely different from what the outside world says. Lu Zhou knew what those rumors were, but he couldn't be bothered to care. Pan Lydian bowed and said, I have a question I'd like to ask the Pavilion Lord. I have been at Evil Sky Pavilion for some time now, and I've heard that the Pavilion Lord is researching the best practices from all schools. Is this true? This question hit the nail on the head, and it was something both Lin Luo and Hua Wudao were especially eager to know. The three had already witnessed Lu Zhou's Buddhist Zen, Buddha's Golden Body, and even Demon Zen techniques, Taoist methods, even the Taoist 9-character mantra. As for sword and blade techniques, these could be seen from their own disciples. Lu Zhou slowly raised his right hand and said calmly, all schools under heaven lead to the same goal. At that moment, he didn't have a prop card in his hand, but the image of a prop card channeling primal energy appeared in his mind. It felt as if the prop card was a grandmaster level teacher, guiding him hands-on every time it was used, that sensation flooding his consciousness. All schools under heaven lead to the same goal. Essentially, they all involve channeling primal energy, condensing it into forceful energy. Whether it is for offense or defense, whether it is gentle or domineering, it all depends on one's own philosophy. Primal energy gathered in Lu Zhou's palm, rotating counterclockwise, and the hand seal emerged. This hand seal couldn't compare to the huge ones created with a prop card, but since this was just a demonstration, full power wasn't necessary. Even so, the three elders were still amazed. The Great Void Treasure Seal, an authentic one of the Taoist 9-character mantra seals. What an eye-opener. To be able to execute it so effortlessly. Incredible, truly incredible. Lu Zhou smiled slightly, closed his hand, and the Great Void Treasure Seal disappeared. He was quite pleased with the praise from the audience. Hua Wudao, still not quite satisfied, bowed again and asked, does that mean you can also use the 6 Union Seal? Lu Zhou maintained a calm expression, but internally he was speechless, thinking to himself, not this. I don't want to pretend anymore. Will this ever end? The 6 Union Seal is Hua Wudao's own creation, requiring the nascent divinity tribulation realm to manifest its full effects, and it's the result of his 20 years of seclusion. I'm only at the divine court realm level. How am I supposed to perform it? Pan Lydian then added, that makes sense. Please, Pavilion Lord, demonstrate it to enlighten this old man. I agree. Lin Luo also expressed his support. The conversation of the 4 elders reached the ears of the nearby young cultivators, who all looked on with anticipation. After all, they were well aware that these 4 were renowned figures, and witnessing such a discussion about the Tao wasn't something that happened every day. At this point, Lu Zhou, feeling like he was being pushed onto the stage, was extremely frustrated. Was he really supposed to use Impenetrable to keep up appearances and waste a card? The 6 Union Seal was Hua Wudao's life's work, a distorted innovation based on the 6 Union technique. technique. Hua Wudao had now opened 9 characters, and with the assistance of the Bagua seal, when fully activated, it could withstand attacks from 8-leaf cultivators. Constructing each character requires immense control, and each additional character is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. When Hua Wudao first joined Evil Sky Pavilion, Hua Wudao's 6 union seal with 6 characters could already withstand Duan Muxing's full assault. Everyone had witnessed Duan Muxing's heavenly first decision, a domineering and powerful spear technique, yet it only needed 6 characters to hold it off. Pan Zhong curiously asked, "Elder Hua, how many characters can a 6 union seal open at most?" Hua Wudao responded, "When I initially innovated the 6 union seal, in theory, it could open up to 10 characters. However, with my cultivation and insight, I can only manifest 9. Is there a 10th character?" Elder Hua's mastery in the 6 union seal is truly unparalleled. While Pan Zhong and the others admired him, they also couldn't help but marvel at Hua Wudao's achievement. How could anyone else easily perform it? Your own painstaking 20-year research into the 6 union seal is not something others could handle instantly. Even if they could understand the principle, they couldn't achieve it all at once. The crowd nodded in agreement, and the 3 elders began looking for a way to let Lu Zhou gracefully step back. Hua Wudao regretted his earlier words. He shouldn't have suggested asking the Pavilion Lord to demonstrate the 6 union seal. What if this upset the Pavilion Lord? How would he handle that? He sneakily glanced at Lu Zhou, noticing the Pavilion Lord seemed to still be contemplating. It seemed the figurative step he provided wasn't big enough. He needed to find a larger one to preserve the Pavilion Lord's dignity. At that moment, Pan Lydian asked, "Old Hua, can your 6 union seal really open up to 10 characters?" Hua Wudao replied, "Indeed it can." "And how many characters can someone else manifest on their first attempt?" continued Pan Lydian. "That's a good question, Old Pan." Hua Wudao quickly added, "When I was at Cloud Sect, it took the sect leader 3 days to manifest the first character. 10 days later, he barely managed the second character. A month later, he achieved the third character, and then there was no progress for a year. Ultimately, due to being busy with other duties, he gave up." "So you're saying no one has been able to manifest more than 3 characters, aside from yourself?" Hua Wudao answered, "Indeed, that's the case. In other words, no one has manifested the 10th character. Others are merely curious about this turtle shrinking method of yours. How could they possibly dedicate 20 years to it like you did?" Lin Luo pursued further, "What is the 10th character?" "Union," Hua Wudao responded, and then looked towards Lu Zhou, thinking, since no one can execute it anyway, there's no harm in mentioning it. This should be a sufficient step down. If no one can execute it, it's normal if the Pavilion Lord can't either. Just then, Lu Zhou lightly tapped his foot, stepping on thin air, and ascended towards the center of the arena. His speed neither hurried nor slow, his expression calm, but he had already decided, as the Grandmaster of Evil Sky Pavilion, how could he allow others to laugh at him? Everyone's gaze converged on Lu Zhou's feet. Bagua seal. It's the Bagua seal. Lu Zhou stepped again. The circle of light bloomed, and the 6 union seal appeared. After all, he possessed Ji Tiandao's millennia of memories. Utilizing his unmatched experience and knowledge, he now demonstrated it vividly. The 3 elders watched intently, awaiting the moment he would form the characters. Though Lu Zhou was not Hua Wudao, his technique, though not as fluid, was still impressive. Then, Lu Zhou turned, facing the crowd from a high position, his right hand sweeping, and with a boom, the character for Qian in seal script emerged, a glittering first character. Then, with a wave of his left hand, the character for Kun appeared, the second character. After executing the second character, he calmly surveyed the crowd. The effect was quite good. Zhou Jifeng and Pan Zhong looked on in admiration. Honestly, by the time Lu Zhou had executed the second character, he felt he had reached his limit. After all, he was only at the Divine Court realm, and performing 2 characters of the 6 union seal was probably convincing enough. Why were they still looking at him with expectation? Shouldn't they be allowing him to step down now? Lu Zhou then lifted his left leg, and with a boom, there was a fluctuation in the primal energy, clearly not as stable as before. Yet, the character for life floated out, circulating around, finally forming the 3rd character. Being able to deploy the 3rd character so quickly and without prior study, purely based on experience, his talent was enough to crush the head of the Cloud Sect. As for the 4th character, it seemed unlikely. However, the 3 elders seemed to forget to provide him with a way out, still looking expectantly at him, waiting for the Pavilion Lord's next move. Lu Zhou stood on thin air, channeling all the primal energy in his energy sea. Just as the primal energy surged out, he suddenly felt the surrounding primal energy stir again, thinking to himself, is this going to backfire? It was nearly impossible to form the 4th character of the 6 union seal with a Divine Court realm cultivation. His brow furrowed. Hua Wudao, noticing this, suddenly awoke and hurriedly said, "Pavilion Lord's capabilities are astounding, admirable indeed." Lin Luo also chimed in, being able to condense the 3rd character of the 6 union seal in such a short time is truly unparalleled in the world. The elders effectively raised the step for Lu Zhou to descend gracefully. However, Lu Zhou discovered that the 4th character was still forming, seemingly unstoppable. It was foreseeable that the attempt to form the 4th character would fail halfway. The primal energy would dissipate instantly, and he would fall. Just then, a moment of clarity flashed through his mind. This was. Lu Zhou went with the momentum and reversed his hand with a push, unleashing a peculiar and powerful force. The Bagua seal under his feet burst forth with even more dazzling light than before, several times brighter than earlier. Qian, Kuan, and Life, the three originally golden seal script characters, turned blue with Lu Zhou's hand movement. The crowd, accustomed to seeing golden radiance, suddenly witnessed this blue energy and couldn't help but feel a fresh sense of wonder, their eyes widening in surprise. Elder Hua, is this your 6 Union seal? Yes, it can't be faked. Is Pavilion Lord harnessing the power of the barrier? The three elders were puzzled. This was the third time Hua Wudao had seen Lu Zhou use this mysterious power. The first was when Lu Zhou was in seclusion in the secret chamber. The second was when he wiped out a great witchcraft on the Lotus platform. And today was the third time. Typically, the manifestation of forceful energy is golden, as is common with Confucian, Buddhist, and Taoist practices. Formations tend to be blue, including amplifying and debuffing ones. Healing methods are usually blue or green, while elemental formations change colors according to the 5 elements. Demon Zen appears in black. No matter the type of energy, it has its general directions and purposes, and the 6 Union seal should rightly appear golden. The blue 6 Union seal they were seeing could only be assumed to be Lu Zhou manipulating the power of the barrier. Hua Wudao's eyes were wide as he stared upward. The next second, the characters Qian, Kuan, Sheng, Sea, Water, Fire, Yu, Wu, and Li, 9 seal script characters, appeared in succession, the perfect execution of the 9-character 6 Union seal. Lu Zhou, sensing something, looked over these 9 characters, recalling the content of heavenly writing. Was this the third supernatural ability revealed by opening heavenly writing? Could the third ability indeed be the spontaneous execution of someone else's technique? From the beginningless, revolving through reincarnations and birth, all are thoroughly understood. This is the host's responsive thought supernatural power. Hua Wudao's face was filled with disbelief, and after snapping out of it, he hurriedly bowed and said, Hua Wudao is thoroughly convinced. The other 2 elders also chimed in. Pavilion Lord's might is unparalleled. Lu Zhou no longer needed any step to step down from, quite satisfied with the scene before him. The 9 characters in front of him and the Bagua formation beneath his feet complemented each other, showcasing formidable defensive power. The remaining extraordinary power had not yet been exhausted, so Lu Zhou decided to continue. With a hum, the 10th character coalesced and joined a 9-character orbit. The 10 characters linked together, increasing their might nearly tenfold. Others had studied for decades to understand such supernatural powers, but Grand Demon Lu Zhou had mastered it in just a few minutes, and he even demonstrated stronger power. After he executed the final E character, the floating Bagua seal beneath him suddenly burst forth, expanding rapidly, centering on the practice field, enveloping the pavilion, almost covering half of Golden Court Mountain, and even reaching the towering Evil Sky Pavilion. A 10-character 6 Union seal? Hua Wudao was dumbfounded, muttering to himself. The 10-character 6 Union seal dissipated in an instant, and Lu Zhou gently landed, as stable as ever. What he thought internally didn't matter. He had to act the part externally. The crowd looked up, speechless for a moment, already in awe from the 9 characters, and the sudden appearance of the 10th character further shocked them. Lu Zhou's expression remained calm as ever. He read the impact from everyone's faces, very pleased with the result. However, he also made a decision to show off less in front of these people in the future, as it had cost him the extraordinary power he had slowly accumulated. Rather than showing off, he would be better off properly training his disciples. It wasn't a total loss, though. After the experiment, Lu Zhou confirmed the third supernatural ability of heavenly writing, the divine power of the host's responsive thoughts. The implication of responsive seemed to mean this power could execute others' techniques. Lu Zhou also found it strange that the system's lethal strike card had a similar effect. If the supernatural powers within the 3 volumes of heavenly writing were to be counted, wouldn't that mean he possessed a permanent lethal strike and impenetrable? However, considering that the various powers he had used previously hadn't instantly defeated opponents, he pondered deeply. In other words, the heavenly writing supernatural power he currently possesses is not yet on par with lethal strike or impenetrable. After pondering, Lu Zhou looked at Hua Wudao and asked, Elder Hua, any more questions? Hua Wudao's spirit had already been crushed. How could he remain composed after witnessing his 20-year 6 Union seal being so effortlessly executed by the Pavilion Lord? Absolutely not. Seeing this, Pan Lydian quickly nudged him. Elder Hua. Hua Wudao then came to his senses, wiping the cold sweat from his face. I have no questions. He did have a belly full of questions about the 6 Union seal, but he really couldn't bring himself to ask them. Lin Luo bowed and said, a 10-character 6 Union seal? That's probably unprecedented, right? Pan Lydian exclaimed, not just unprecedented. I fear there will be no one else capable in the future. Even without any improvements, no one could perform the 10th seal of the 6 Union seal. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never believe someone could do it. Is this really the first time Pavilion Lord has used the 6 Union seal? Lu Zhou nodded, acknowledging this was true. They could believe it or not. Lin Luo continued to inquire, was this the power of the barrier? Lu Zhou did not immediately respond. He knew that to truly perform a 10-character 6 Union seal would require at least an 8-petal cultivation because the 10th seal demands an immense amount of power to support. He couldn't just admit he had mastered the heavenly writing supernatural power, so he vaguely explained it requires immense power to support. Upon hearing this, Hua Wudao immediately knelt on one knee and apologized. What talents or abilities do I have to make such an impolite request to the Pavilion Lord? I didn't expect it would involve using the power of the barrier. Please punish me severely, Pavilion Lord. This situation has arisen because of me. Golden Court Mountain has already lost its barrier, and you used the last of the barrier's power to demonstrate. How will we face strong enemies in the future? Lu Zhou's gaze fell on Hua Wudao, noticing his loyalty had increased significantly, so he said, stand up and speak. The power of the barrier is just external strength. How could it truly decide the outcome? Turning his gaze to Pan Lydian, Lu Zhou asked, how did you breach the barrier when you first came to Golden Court Mountain? Pan Lydian laughed heartily, lifting the gourd in his hand and said, that's simple. I know a bit about formations. Although the barrier is strong, it has become extremely fragile due to lack of maintenance over the years. It is evident that the formation has undergone several infusions and repairs of primal energy, but many of the runes are damaged. Besides, this old man's gourd is no ordinary object. With that, he tossed the gourd into the air where it spun and emitted a golden glow. Hua Wudao, surprised, exclaimed, a treasure from the Blackwood Forest. In the Blackwood Forest, there is a particularly strange gourd vine, and the materials left after being burnt in a great fire, once forged and hammered, become special weapons, the grade of which is not inferior to heavenly level. It is well known that ordinary people's weapons are classified as common grade, but this type of gourd is uniquely distinctive. Regardless of the material quality, weapons are generally divided into 4 grades: yellow, profound, earth, and heaven. Once a weapon reaches the earth grade, it will have a compatibility level. When the user's compatibility with the weapon reaches its peak, it can unleash even stronger power. At the heavenly grade, the weapon's characteristics will further manifest, needing to match the user's style. For example, using bladed weapons would be a waste for Hua Wudao, who excels in defensive cultivation. Blades would indeed be less effective for him, and cultivators who are proficient in musical rhythms would be suited for instruments like zither, flutes, and pipes. However, musical rhythm cultivation techniques are often too difficult, and not many people master them. Regardless of the type, weapons are the result of centuries of accumulation and summary, making their intended use and function clear. However, the function of the gourd as a weapon is not immediately apparent, making its use as a weapon quite rare. What use is your gourd? Lun Luo asked directly. Pan Lydian caught the wine gourd back, held it in his palm, and said proudly, it has many uses. It can kill a person, serve as a pillow, refresh the mind, or intoxicate and confuse. Lun Luo displayed a skeptical attitude, as if to say, I don't believe you, you crafty old man. Pan Zhong watched with delight and praised, old Pan is impressive. I wish I had such a weapon. Do you want it? I do, Pan Zhong replied without hesitation. Who wouldn't dream of owning a heavenly grade weapon? Unfortunately, they are exceedingly rare. Pan Lydian grinned and said, when you reach the nascent divinity tribulation realm, I will give you this gourd. How about that? Though they were close, the relationship didn't extend to gifting heavenly grade weapons. The importance of such weapons is well known even to those just entering the mystic enlightening realm. The elders understand this, but keep it unspoken. At this point, unable to restrain himself, Hua Wudao approached Lu Zhou and bowed. Please enlighten me, Pavilion Lord, on how to perform the 10th character of the 6 Union Seal. Lu Zhou stroked his beard and thought, glad that the request wasn't for another demonstration. He had indeed gained some insights from his recent performance. Nature follows the way of heaven and earth, thus, it should return to the realm between heaven and earth. Do you understand? Hua Wudao was confused. Although he was once a prodigy of the Cloud sect, admitting his confusion seemed beneath him, so he vaguely nodded. I think I understand a bit. Reflect on it more, and you will find enlightenment. Lu Zhou left these words behind and walked back towards Evil Sky Pavilion. Modern philosophy really did come in handy, speaking universally applicable truths that are often nebulous. Not understanding was exactly the point, as it allowed others to be impressed without fully grasping the meaning. Moreover, since he didn't receive merit points for this guidance, it showed they weren't his disciples, so further advice was futile. They were all elders without much future or hope. Better to focus his energy on his problematic disciples. After returning to the East Pavilion, Lu Zhou revisited his current tally of divine abilities. The first heavenly writing divine ability, divine power of the voices of all beings, falls into the category of sonic power. The second heavenly writing divine ability, divine power of supreme wisdom that extinguishes dharma, serves as an offensive ability akin to the explosion of the blue lotus. The third heavenly writing divine ability, divine power of the host's responsive thoughts, seems to emulate the practices of various schools. Together with the inherent capability of heavenly writing to counteract enchantments from witchcraft and hypnotic effects from sacred music, it's clear that the third heavenly writing ability is connected to these elements. Having 3 divine abilities implies the potential for a fourth. So, where will the 4th volume of heavenly writing be found? As Lu Zhou pondered, he walked over to the desk to examine the ancient parchment map, noting that the location of the sword tomb had become clearly clearly visible. It indeed showed the locations where heavenly writing could be opened. However, other than the divine capital and the sword tomb, the rest of the map remained blurry. The fourth volume of heavenly writing will just have to wait. With this parchment map, there's no worry about not finding the next heavenly writing volume. He decided to continue studying heavenly writing. Meanwhile, in a quiet residence, Siwia was coughing violently. He pulled open his clothing to reveal a robust torso. The color of the body-binding divine spell had faded, but his cultivation had not recovered at all. Is this really a Taoist divine spell? Siwia felt an emerging premonition. He had a feeling that this wasn't a Taoist spell, and that no one other than his master could possibly undo it. As he contemplated, Yi Zhixing appeared nearby. Seeing Siwia's pale face, he quickly called out, "Sect leader?" Siwia waved his hand to indicate he was all right. Report the situation. Yi Zhixing reported, "Spies near Golden Court Mountain have reported that the barrier around the mountain has disappeared." Siwia was puzzled by this news. Could something have happened to Evil Sky Pavilion? Sect leader, after the old master left the sword tomb, I sent someone there. They discovered that the demonic sword had been taken and had ended up in Jian Aijian's hands. Siwia thought for a moment and said, given master's temperament, he wouldn't easily gift the demonic sword to anyone else. If someone is secretly aiding Evil Sky Pavilion, it's likely Jian Aijian. Yi Zhixing was somewhat surprised. Jian Aijian, one of the three great sword enthusiasts, usually keeps to himself and avoids trouble. Why would it be him? He had just finished speaking when he showed an embarrassed expression, as the sect leader had already ordered him to investigate Jian Aijian's background, but to no avail. Siwia shook his head. The only person who could know the palace walls inside out must be him, the third prince of the great flame royal family, Lu Chen. During the chaos at the palace walls years ago, the second prince burned the Jinghe palace to eliminate dissent. Thousands died in the fire, yet Lu Chen's body was never found. He must have escaped. Perhaps he was burned to ash? Yi Zhixing asked. Siwia did not respond. While that was possible, the likelihood was too small. After all, Lu Chen was a cultivator. If it weren't for a schemer behind the scenes, how could such an outcome have occurred? Continue the investigation. Understood. Sect leader, Mr. 5 is still in the palace taking care of the Empress Dowager and hasn't returned to Evil Sky Pavilion. I'm worried Molly might make a move against her. Siwia nodded. Try to persuade her to return. But the fourth prince Lu Bing is returning to the capital, and the second prince is hosting a banquet to welcome him and has invited him to a hunting trip in Rue North. I'm worried that the Empress Dowager and Mr. 5 will also go to Rue North. The Emperor has approved it, allowing the Empress Dowager to recuperate. Hearing this, Siwia turned and looked in the direction of Rue North. Rue North is a good place. The second prince is ambitious and wants to control the government. Lu Bing has military merits and is gathering relationships everywhere. How could the second prince not be wary? Sister 5 is also a member of the royal family. That's exactly what I'm worried about. When is the hunting scheduled? During the transition between autumn and winter, in about 3 months. The fourth prince, the third prince, the second prince, and the suddenly appearing princess. All here. Mentioning autumn and winter, Siwia felt a bit sentimental. Cultivators who reach the Brahma Sea realm and open the 8 meridians hardly feel the cold or heat. Now, having lost all his cultivation, as autumn and winter approached, he actually felt the cold and heat. Thinking this, he sighed. If Jian Aijian really is the third prince, he should look after Sister 5. To be safe, let's have Dark Net lend a hand. I will obey, Yi Zhixing said, then leapt out of the pavilion. Just then, a woman dressed in simple elegance slowly approached, and upon seeing her, Siwia immediately showed joy and hurried out of the pavilion. Siwia greets Sister 6. Yi Tianxin's gaze fell on him. Sizing him up briefly, she asked, Little brother 7, what about your cultivation? Siwia smiled helplessly. It's master's body-binding divine spell. Yi Tianxin had been busy trying to heal and restore her cultivation and had paid little attention to other matters. She frowned slightly, showing a puzzled expression. Siwia explained, it's all a misunderstanding. My elder brother and I wanted to destroy Clarity Sect, but unexpectedly, Master appeared to stop us. With no choice, I had to distract Master, but accidentally fell under his divine spell. Yi Tianxin said calmly, with your skills, it shouldn't be hard to undo the spell, right? Siwia shook his head helplessly. Sister 6 doesn't know. Master has absorbed the power of the barrier, and his methods are astounding. Even the Celestial Master's sect's Taoists cannot undo this curse. Yi Tianxin paused, remembering her own encounters with Master. Whether it was the demonic pills or the power of the barrier, she had seen with her own eyes the 9th leaf opening on the lotus seat beneath Master. Could she really have been mistaken? Siwia saw her lost in thought and gently called out, Sister 6. Yi Tianxin snapped out of her reverie and said, it's nothing. Since leaving Evil Sky Pavilion, has Sister fully recovered your cultivation? About 70 or 80%, Yi Tianxin answered casually. What are Sister's plans for the future? Siwia asked. This question seemed casual, but it was what he was most concerned about. He needed to understand the relationship between Yi Tianxin and Evil Sky Pavilion, especially after the 5 rats incident. Yi Tianxin responded, I'm looking for something that might not even exist. Siwia smiled and said, what is Sister looking for? Maybe I can help. There's nothing under heaven that I can't find out. Yi Tianxin and took another long look at Siwuya. She hadn't had much interaction with him since leaving Evil Sky Pavilion, but she had heard of the Dark Net's information network. I'm looking for something called Writing the Yellow. After saying this, she showed a bitter smile. I should look for it myself. You don't have to trouble yourself. Seeing her about to turn away, Siwuya quickly spoke up. In the nation of White Citizen to the north of Dragonfish, there lives Writing the Yellow, a creature with the appearance of a fox but with horns on its back. Writing the Yellow has 2,000 years of lifespan. Yi Tianxin looked at him with a complex expression. You know about Writing the Yellow? Siwuya sighed and continued. After Wei Zhuoyan's death, I had people investigate the affair of crossing the Sky River, which led us to clues about Writing the Yellow, but nothing further could be found. The implication was clear. If even his Dark Net couldn't find more, how could she possibly do it alone? Yi Tianxin asked. Little Brother 7, you don't believe in the existence of such a creature? Siwuya hesitated for a moment. The great limitation of lifespan has always been the greatest shackles for human cultivators, with no exceptions to date. If Writing the Yellow truly granted a lifespan of 2,000 years, wouldn't that break the millennium limit? Could that be possible? He thought for a moment and then asked, does Sister believe in it? Yi Tianxin didn't hesitate and firmly answered, I believe.